As you are aware, last week I met with Director Comey and career prosecutors and agents who conducted that investigation. I received and accepted their unanimous recommendation that the thorough, year-long investigation be closed and no charges be brought against any individuals within the scope of the investigation. And while I understand that this investigation has generated significant public interest, as Attorney General, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further on the underlying facts of the investigation or the legal basis for the team's recommendation.
Secretary Clinton stated that she never sent or received information marked as classified on her server. Director Comey stated that was not true. Do you agree with Director Comey?
You know, Director Comey has chosen to provide great detail into the basis for his recommendations that were ultimately provided to me. He's chosen to provide detailed statements, and I would refer you to those statements. I, as Attorney General, am not able to provide any further comment on the facts or the substance of the investigation.
Well, General Lynch, I think you would agree that the ultimate responsibility for a prosecutorial decision does not rest with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but with the Department of Justice, which you head. Have you not taken a close look at the work done by Director Comey, especially given the extreme national interest in this issue, to make a determination yourself whether you and those working for you agree or disagree with Director Comey?
As I've indicated, I received the recommendation of the team, and that team was composed of prosecutors and agents. It was a unanimous recommendation as to how to resolve the investigation and to what the information that they had received.
Do you agree with the conclusion?
And I accepted that recommendation. I saw no reason not to accept it, and again, I reiterate my pride and faith in their work.
Secretary Clinton stated that she did not email any classified material, and Director Comey stated there was classified material emailed. Do you agree with Director Comey's conclusion about that?
Again, I would have to refer you to Director Comey's statements for the basis for his recommendation.
Director Comey stated that there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information. Do you agree with Director Comey's statement?
Again, I would refer you to Director Comey for any further explanation as to the basis for his recommendations. The recommendation that I received from the team, including Director Comey, was that the investigation be resolved without charges.
Director Comey made a recommendation, but he made a recommendation to the Department of Justice, which you head, and you would have to come to the final conclusion on whether or not to act. I would presume that before you acted, you would look at his conclusions and determine whether you agreed with them or not. Is intent to violate the law a requirement under 18 U.S.C. Section 793F?
Well, Congressman, I think the statutes that were considered here speak for themselves. To answer further would require a discussion of the facts and the analysis of this matter, which, as I've indicated, I'm not in a position to provide at this time. Again, I refer you to Director Comey's discussion for that. As I've indicated, the team reviewed this matter, and it was a unanimous team decision.
And you made a decision following their recommendation to you that you were not going to prosecute and the matter was closed. Is that correct?
I made the decision some time ago that I would accept the recommendation of that team and was awaiting that recommendation. When I received it, there was no basis not to accept it. And again, I reiterate my pride and faith in them. Well,
thank you. I appreciate your faith in them. The concern here is regard to your sworn oath to uphold the United States Constitution and the laws thereunder, including 18 U.S.C. Section 793F and 18 U.S.C. Section 1924, and to conclude that no prosecution would take place without examining and drawing conclusions regarding the questions that I've just asked does not seem to be a responsible way to uphold your constitutionally sworn oath.
You are in charge of the Department of Justice. The buck stops with you. And I'm concerned that you keep on saying that you have deferred the authority that by law is yours to Director Comey. Let me give an example. Mr. Comey has said that Secretary Clinton was extremely careless in her handling of highly classified, very sensitive information. Now, the criminal statute uses the word gross negligence, and I can't for the life of me figure out what the difference between gross negligence and extremely careless is unless one really wants to parse some words. Now, secondly, the misdemeanor statute does not require intent. It's a strict liability statute, and it relates to the removal and retention of classified information. So it doesn't matter whether Secretary Clinton had the intent to do that or not. The fact is that the FBI said that she did it. Now, I think that what Director Comey has said is that Secretary Clinton's actions essentially meet the definition for prosecution under the statute. Why did you defer to Director Comey when the responsibility is yours?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. Let me be clear that my decision was to accept the recommendation of the team of agents and investigators who worked on this. And these are the career attorneys as well as the dedicated investigators, including the FBI director, who worked on this matter for over a year. They've reviewed the facts, they followed the facts, they looked at the law, they've applied the facts to that law, and came up with a unanimous recommendation, a joint recommendation, in effect, that was provided to me.
I have a limited amount of time. You know, the fact is that whether it's extremely careless or gross negligence and a strict liability statute, I think that the language of the statute is clear. Now, I've noted that the Justice Department over the last several years has prosecuted several servicemen for doing the exact same thing that Secretary Clinton did. In one case, actually reached a judgment of a court that prohibited that serviceman from ever having a security classification again. Now, you have a problem, Madam Attorney General, that people think that there's a different standard between the servicemen and Secretary Clinton, and the fact that the language is almost synonymous, if not synonymous, saying no prosecution of Secretary Clinton and prosecution and conviction of the servicemen. You have a burden, I think, to convince to the American public that you don't have a double standard. You're not meeting the burden, and how do you plan to change the argument that you make to the American public so that they can be convinced that the thing was correct and that you made the right decision, rather than simply deferring to people in the FBI and prosecutors?
Congressman, every case stands on its own separate facts and the application of those facts to the law. So you'd have to refer to the specific facts of the other matters that you're referring to. With respect to the investigation into the former Secretary's handling of classified information, her private email system, again, I can tell you and this entire committee and the American people that all of the relevant facts were considered, investigated thoroughly, and reviewed by the entire team, which again is composed of career independent investigators as well as lawyers, and their recommendation upon a full and thorough analysis was that the matter be resolved in the way in which it was recommended to me. As I've indicated, I determined to accept that recommendation and did in fact accept that recommendation.
One final question. One of the service people who was prosecuted basically sent an email out that his fellow Marines were in danger. And he ended up getting prosecuted for warning his fellow Marines that their lives may be in danger. Now, here in the case of Mrs. Clinton, the private email arrangement was simply to avoid public scrutiny. So in terms of the intent of Major Jason Bresler and Secretary Clinton, one, Major Bresler, was doing it to save his colleagues. The other, Secretary Clinton, was to avoid transparency. Now, in terms of the bottom line, that's the hoop that you have to jump through in order to retain and regain your credibility with the American public. I hope that you'll be able to do that, and I yield back.
Madam Attorney General, I think the thing that I find so disheartening, so unfortunate about FBI Director Comey's decision not to recommend criminal charges against former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton last week was that for a lot of Americans, it looked like we're seeing a double standard here, unequal treatment under the law. Under the facts of the case as laid out by Director Comey, virtually anybody else, I think most Americans think, including myself, there would have been charges brought for a crime against virtually anybody else in this country. But the politically connected Hillary Clinton, well, we won't charge her. I mean, look what Comey laid out. It's already been laid out to some degree, but I think it warrants doing it again. He found that despite the fact that Hillary claimed that she'd never sent or received classified information over a private email, she'd actually sent 110 of them, over 100 of them, and 8 of those were determined to have been top secret. I assume that based upon the way you've answered some of my colleagues' questions prior to this, you're not going to acknowledge what I think virtually every other American believes, even her supporters. And that's at least acknowledge, as Director Comey did, that she lied. Would you respond?
Congressman, with respect to the director's statements, as I've indicated, he's provided really unprecedented access into his views of the matter, and I would refer you to them.
I, for the life of me, don't know what the difference between extreme carelessness and gross negligence is. He said he found one, but apparently not the others. Could you shed some light for me and perhaps anybody else in this room or that may ultimately watch this? What is the difference between the two?
Well, Congressman, again, I'm not going to further explain the director's comments as he has, I believe, explained them.
Every American, including the President of the United States, including a candidate for the highest office in our land, ought to be treated equally under the law. And I think in this case, I think it's a travesty because I don't think Hillary Clinton has been treated like any other American would have been treated under the same circumstances.
So far today, you have rarely said absolutely yes or absolutely no, correct? You've mostly talked in terms of I can't answer that, or it's not appropriate, or see the FBI director. And so in light of that, and this is really a question of what do I tell the Marines, the sailors, Army personnel in my district, the veterans, the contractors, all those who work for the government with classified information. The former Secretary of State, in an unambiguous way, said repeatedly, both under oath and to the public, time and time again, I did not send or receive any information marked classified. And you're aware of that she had definitively said this repeatedly, right?
I believe her statements are on the record, and I defer you to that.
What do I say when, in fact, saying something that isn't true, handling classified information in an extremely careless way, has no criminal ramifications? What do I say to them? How do I reconcile the fact that they know that their friends and colleagues have been prosecuted or fired for doing less in the past?
Congressman, I can't speak to any cases you may be referring to involving friends or colleagues. Again, I would refer you to the description that
I appreciate
provided
that,
about
Madam General, but I've got to ask you a question.
That follow this similar fact pattern.
You keep mentioning this professional team of career professionals. Were there any political appointees on that team? Any people who, in fact, did not work for the State Department or did not work for the U.S. Attorney's Office prior to President Obama coming into office?
Well, again, with respect to the team, typically we don't go into the composition of it. It was led by our National Security Division, and everyone on the team was a career individual. Again,
I'll ask the question with specificity. I'm not asking for names. Was there at least one person who was politically appointed that was on that team?
The investigative team was composed of career prosecutors and seasoned agents.
The question is, was there at least one that did not work a career, that was in fact an appointee, either confirmed or unconfirmed?
Congressman, I've replied to you as to the composition of the team, that
okay.
All of them.
So your answer is no, there were no political appointees.
All of them were career lawyers as well as seasoned investigators.
Okay. I'll take that as a no, because that's the only way I can interpret what you keep repeating.
My question, though, is are there any legal prohibitions on you that Director Comey did not have?
Well, as I've indicated, it would not be appropriate in my role to discuss the specific facts and the law.
Is the legal prohibition against that, other than the fact that you just don't have the same knowledge about the case that Director Comey had?
We typically actually do not provide the level of detail that Director Comey did. He chose to provide that
Is
level
there
of
any legal
information and
prohibition,
detail.
or is that just a choice that you make in not disclosing that information?
Well, as indicated, we obviously are not allowed to discuss certain types of information, for example, grand jury information
I
in
know,
any
but we're
matter.
not talking about grand jury information here, are we? What I want to know is, tell me, is there a legal reason that prohibits you from giving us information, or is that just a choice you have made?
Congressman, as I've indicated, the Director and I had very different roles in this investigation, so his level of detail is significantly different from mine, and I would not be able to provide you with that same level of detail.
Because you don't have the information, not because there's a legal prohibition.
In addition to that, in part of my role as Attorney General, I would not be going into these discussions typically. We have taken the step of providing more information on this matter than in others.
I just need to know if there's a legal prohibition that prohibits you from disclosing information to this committee, or is that a choice you have made?
It would depend upon the nature of the information.
Questions
Certainly
that
there
you've been
would
asked
be.
that you've had, is there any legal prohibition that would prohibit you from giving the same information that Director Comey has given?
Well, with respect to the source of that information, if it came from the grand jury, that would be a legal prohibition. With respect to opinions
let the record say
about
that
the
there
matter
is
of
no
law,
legal
that's a different issue.
prohibition that can be cited here. Having looked at what the Supreme Court has now said, do you believe that prosecution was a mistake?
Certainly, I believe that the prosecutors who worked on that matter investigated it, presented it to a grand jury, and received an indictment. We, of course, have, as presented in our papers before the Supreme Court,
a choice which you
have
have
made a
not
different
made in
argument.
Secretary Clinton's case. It would be, can you tell us now, looking at that and the way you interpreted that statute, was that a mistake?
Congressman, with respect to the investigation of the former governor of Virginia, I don't have a comment on that. We have accepted the results of the Supreme Court.
Not because you don't have a legal prohibition,
and will, of course,
simply
be
because
reviewing
you
the
refuse
case
to
in the
comment.
light of that.
Then my final question then, as time is running out, is when you look at a governor of Virginia that you launched everything this department had against to destroy him and to prosecute him, can you tell me the federal nexus you had in that case and compare that to the federal nexus against Secretary Clinton in national security of this country, which you refused to bring to a grand jury or for indictment to see if, in fact, one is justified?
Congressman, I don't have a comment on the McDonald case except to refer you to the pleadings in that
Can you
for a
compare the
discussion of
federal
the law
nexus
there.
between the two cases for us, please?
Congressman, I don't have a comparison between those two cases for you.
And that's rather disappointing because the national security of the country is rather important to the country.
Do you believe that Hillary Clinton knowingly removed classified information?
You know, I don't have a comment on or a characterization.
I understand that, and
that was
also,
part of
do you
the
believe that she had intent to keep unauthorized information in an unauthorized location? And you have no comment on that?
No, I'd refer you to my statement on the recommendations that I accepted.
And I understand that. Now, the hinge of this thing, and according to Mr. Sensenbrenner, and I'll say myself, the definition of the word gross negligence, in that Director Comey used the term extreme carelessness, and Mr. Sensenbrenner asked you to define the difference between that and gross negligence. Do you find it ironic that the last examination of a Clinton in this room, the previous one, Bill Clinton, before this Judiciary Committee, not technically in this room, hinged on the meaning of the word is? It looks to me like this investigation is hinging upon the meaning of extreme carelessness versus gross negligence. Do you actually see that there's a difference between those two words?
Congressman, I always start with the statute, with any review that is being done on any matter by the Department of Justice. And we look to the statute, legislative history, case law, and we look at the facts as are developed by an investigation and apply them to that statute and to that standard. And that is what the team did in this case, and that was, I believe, the basis for their recommendation.
Director Comey stated in his press conference that they didn't have evidence that the classified information or the top secret information had been hacked by a foreign actor. But neither did he state that they had any evidence that it had not been hacked, nor did, and he stated also it would be unlikely that we would know if it had been. Now, under Snowden, we have to operate as if any information he had access to is now in the possession of foreign hostile actors. Would you believe that's the same thing with any information that Hillary Clinton had on her private server? We have to act as if it were in the hands of a hostile foreign actor.
I don't have a comment on a characterization or comparison of Mr. Snowden and Mrs. Clinton.
Well, just to answer the part about Hillary Clinton then, please, General Lynch.
You had asked me
The information that was on her server that we have to presume now that it's in the hands of hostile foreign actors. Do we have to handle it as if that's the case? And if so, didn't that endanger our national security?
Congressman, I think that you'd have to look at the facts of the matter and determine whether or not there had been access. And as the director indicated, I believe he's responded to that.
And it is a very serious matter, and it's been covered up, General Lynch.
18 U.S.C. 1924, where it says any federal official who, quote, becomes possessed of documents or materials containing classified information of the United States and knowingly removes such documents or materials without authority and with the intent to retain such documents or materials in an unauthorized location shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 1 year or both. Now, this statute doesn't require an intent to profit or to harm the United States or otherwise act in a manner disloyal to the United States. It simply requires intent to retain classified documents at an unauthorized location, something FBI Director Comey's own comments suggest was the case with Hillary Clinton's investigation. Can you walk us through your reasoning on your non-prosecution decision in the Clinton-based case based on this particular statute?
Congressman, with respect to the reasoning for my recommendation, as I have stated before, I had committed to and did accept the recommendations of the team working on this matter. And as I indicated in my opening statement, it would not be appropriate for me as Attorney General to go into that level of analysis. I believe the FBI Director has chosen to make his recommendations and analysis public in order to afford more clarity into that. But the team did review the relevant laws, the relevant facts that the investigation revealed. They relied solely on that and not on anything else in making that recommendation, which was unanimous to me.
Well, Madam Chair, Madam Attorney General, you know, the FBI doesn't give an opinion or decide if an individual will be prosecuted. You do, but many members already, I can see where this is going. They've far more capable members of this committee have summarily failed, as I just did, to get you to answer even the most reasonable and relevant question. And consequently, I'm going to simply capitulate to your prodigious dissimulation skills and suspend the remainder of my questions. Instead, I just want to remind all of us that in a republic like America, which is fundamentally predicated on the rule of law and the equality of us all under the rule of law, there are few things that break faith with America and the American people and undermine their trust in their government more than witnessing the highest law enforcement officer in the land blatantly ignoring the crystal clear meaning and equal protection and equal enforcement of the laws as they are written. And Madam Attorney General, I think such an abrogation of your official duties and responsibilities, not just a matter of what will be written writ large in the annals of your own legacy, it's something rather that goes to the very heart of the rule of law in a republic that so many lying out in Arlington National Cemetery have died to keep.
How much time did you spend reading the recorded testimony of Hillary Clinton from that 3.5-hour interview?
Congressman, I'm not going to go into the particulars of my briefing, except to say that...
No, this is just your own personal work. Did you go through in detail all of the statements she made in that 3.5-hour interview?
Congressman, as I've indicated previously, my role that I had decided earlier was that I would be speaking and meeting with the team who had done that substantive in-depth work for over a year, that had worked on this matter, that had compared the facts and the evidence.
Now, you've said that several times, Attorney General, and I don't have enough time to have you keep repeating that 4 more times. But when Chairman Goodlatte asked you about the statute and whether it includes the term gross negligence, you made an improper statement. You said discussion of the statute would require discussion of the facts. That's not true. You know, from my years of judging on the bench, your comment that discussion of the statute would require discussion of the facts, when he asked you about an element that's contained in the statute, Attorney General, that really sounds like an answer somebody would give who hadn't read the statute and was looking for a dodge to avoid talking about a statute with which they're not familiar. You are aware, and this doesn't require any discussion of any facts whatsoever, but you are aware that in 18 U.S.C. 793F, gross negligence is an element of the offense, are you not?
Congressman, I refer you to my statement that you just commented on with respect
to
my
well, if
answer
you're not
to the
going to answer the
chairman.
question, I'm afraid you may
Question
be
to me
reinforcing
was the
it.
meaning of a phrase
Now,
in
you
the
said there was no
and I referred
basis
to it in
not
that
to
manner.
accept the recommendation of our team, but you've given no indication whatsoever that you did any independent reading of the evidence, of the statements. Was Hillary Clinton's statement even recorded?
Congressman, I'm not going to discuss the specifics of that. I believe the FBI has provided extraordinary clarity and insight
Okay,
into
well,
that.
if you're not going to
That
answer the
information is
question,
before
then
you.
let's move on. But I find it extraordinary that after a 3.5-hour interview, so quickly a recommendation is made. So there are inquiring minds that are very intelligent that have said, wow, I thought it would be weeks before an answer could be made, but it looks like to do a 3.5-hour interview, you haven't reviewed the facts, you reviewed the team recommendation, and I would just encourage you, Attorney General, your oath was not to follow the recommendation of some team. Your oath is your own responsibility to our Constitution and those that are working under you.
General Lynch, we are now about halfway through the members of this committee asking questions, and your refusal to answer questions regarding one of the most important investigations of someone who seeks to serve in the highest office in this land is an abdication of your responsibility. This is a very important issue of whether or not the Justice Department is going to uphold the rule of law in this country, and I hope that with the questions that will be forthcoming now, you will be more forthcoming with answers. Thank you. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Lynch, who made the decision that no charges would be brought against Secretary Clinton?
Congressman, with respect to that decision, I had determined that I would accept the recommendation of the team.
So
I made that known.
Who ultimately made the decision?
I made that known, and then when the recommendation was given to me, I did accept that recommendation.
So did you ultimately make that decision, or did Director Comey?
Well, Director Comey was part of the team.
Who ultimately made the decision?
So the team consisted of prosecutors and agents. That did include Director Comey,
I
but
want to
there
know where
were
the buck
others.
stops. Who made the decision?
As I indicated before, I had previously decided that I would accept their recommendation when they made it to me.
Are you saying
Did
you made the
accept their
decision?
recommendation.
Are you saying you made the decision?
I had previously indicated I would accept their
Okay,
recommendation.
so on July
and
1st, let's just run through that. On July 1st, you said, I'll accept the recommendations of the FBI. Mr. Comey didn't announce his decision until July 5th, and he said that he didn't talk to you beforehand. Now, I assume it's not unusual for the Attorney General to accept the recommendations of the FBI and the career prosecutors and the team, as you've so often cited. What is unusual is to make a big, bold public announcement that you're going to do it. It's one thing to do it. I assume it happens all the time. It's another thing to announce ahead of time you're going to do it. So here's what I'm having trouble with, and I guess a lot of people are having trouble with. If you commit and announce that you will abide by the FBI's decision before they even finish their investigation, then how can you also say ultimately it was your decision?
Well, Congressman, as I've indicated, I accepted their recommendation. I had indicated
So are you, what I want to know is, was it not your decision or was it your decision? Because it seems to me you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm the Attorney General and I decide, but yet I'm going to take their recommendations even before they make their recommendations.
I had indicated that I would be accepting their recommendation because I wanted to make it clear that any conversation that I might have had with the former president would have no impact on the team or the review
Ever do this
or the
before?
investigation.
You ever do this before?
I have not had occasion to do that before, but I felt it was important
So you've
in this
never
case.
announced before an investigation is done that whatever they come up with, maybe they're going to screw it up, who knows? You've never announced before that whatever they recommend, I'm going to follow. Never happened before.
It was important in this case to do so.
So this is the first time you've ever done that. Announced beforehand, I don't care what their recommendations are, I'm going to, by golly, I'm going to follow them.
I have complete faith in the judgment and the hard work of
I'm
the
not
team.
questioning whether you have faith in them. I think probably a lot of people have faith in the FBI in a lot of situations. I don't know that they agree with them here, but I think they have faith in a lot of times. What I'm questioning is why announce ahead of time when you've never done it before? Why announce ahead of time, I'm going to follow their recommendations, even though I don't know what they are, and still claim you're the ultimate decider?
Well, as I indicated, I felt it was important to express my role in the investigation, to clarify my role, because I was concerned that the conversation I had with the former president would make people think that there could be some influence.
So that was the trigger.
That, in my view, was something that needed to be clarified. I felt that people needed to understand
So
my role
you've never
in
done this before, but when you
and that they
have a
needed to have that,
conversation with the former
information.
president, the husband of the subject of an ongoing investigation, and you have that conversation before they've interviewed the subject and before they've reached their recommendations and finished their investigation, that's what triggered you to do this thing you've never done before, which is announce, I don't care what they recommend, I'm going to follow it.
My concern was that the conversation that I had with President Clinton would be seen by some as having an influence over that. I felt it was important to clarify.
Just some, General Lynch, a lot of people.
And I felt it was important to clarify that even before I had landed in Phoenix, I had made that decision.
Here's what I see
I felt
happening
it was
here.
important that people hear that from me.
Here's what I think is, I think your actions made it worse. I really do. I think a lot of people already think that there are two systems, as many have talked about, one for we the people, a different one, entirely different one for the politically connected. Your former Secretary of State, your former Senator, your former First Lady, your nominee for President, your husband meets with you 5 days before a decision is announced. Different standard for those facts. And you proved it. You demonstrated that it's different by your actions because you said you've never done this before, so you not only You changed your internal practices. You changed the fact that you've never announced beforehand that you're going to follow recommendations before you even have the recommendations. You contribute, your actions contributed to this belief that the system is rigged. And that, you made a bad situation worse by saying, I'm going to do whatever they recommend, even though I don't know what the recommendations are. I don't know anyone who would conduct themselves that way when they're the ultimate decider. But you said, I'm going to wait. I'm going to do whatever they said, and I'm not even going to wait to see what they're recommending. I'm going to follow it. You showed that this case was different, and the law is supposed to treat every single person the same. And your announcement, by definition, made this thing entirely different. And then, of course, what was ultimately decided made it entirely different as well.
Does an individual need a security clearance to review or have access to classified material?
Congressman, that issue would be dependent upon the agency for whom they worked and the nature of the work that they did. With respect
Can you give me
to
an example where you don't need a security clearance to view classified material?
No, I believe, as I was going to say, they would, but the type of clearance varies with every agency, and the agency would make that decision and determination.
Is it legal or illegal to share classified information with somebody who doesn't have a security clearance?
Congressman, it depends on the facts of every situation. You'd have to determine how that sharing occurred. You'd have to determine the means. You'd have to determine, the reason, the intent. Certainly, depending upon how you view the statute, it could go any number of ways.
Do you think there is a scenario in which you could share classified information with somebody who doesn't have the requisite security clearance?
No, I would not draw that conclusion. I would say that I'm not able to answer it as a hypothetical, but that there are a number of factors that would go into the decision, and one could have any number of results.
Is it legal or illegal to provide access to somebody who doesn't have the requisite security clearance to view classified material?
To provide access?
Yeah.
Again, I'd need more facts on the hypothetical, but I would look at a number of things, and depending upon how you reviewed it, it could go any number of ways.
Is it legal or illegal to store, house, or retain classified information in a non-secure location?
Again, I would refer you to the statute. One could, in fact, have liability, again, depending upon the nature and facts and
Do you
circumstances.
have any examples of where it's legally acceptable to retain classified information in a non-secure location?
I don't have a hypothetical answer for that.
Is it legal or illegal to provide false testimony under oath?
There are a number of statutes that cover that, both at the federal and state level. There are a number of ways in which that could be found.
There's a difference between prosecuting something and whether it's legal or illegal. You know, these questions are pretty simple, and we've got millions of people with security clearance. How are they supposed to go through the gyrations that you've laid out in order to make a simple determination?
Congressman, if we had a specific fact situation or fact pattern, that could be reviewed.
I'm just asking,
when it comes
is
to a
it
hypothetical situation, it would be unfair to come up with a blanket answer to someone without reviewing all the facts of their situation.
I'm asking if it's legal or illegal to share classified information with somebody who doesn't have a security clearance.
Again, I would refer you to the appropriate statutes, and I'd refer you to the facts of every situation. It would be unfair to give a blanket answer to every hypothetical.
Why aren't we telling all the federal employees and contractors who have access to classified information, those in our military, why aren't we telling them, you can't do this, it's against the law? Why can't you say that?
We give them guidance. Again, every agency does. We give them examples. We give them information as to how to make those decisions. We show them. And again, every information provides, every agency provides
why is the law not sufficient guidance? You believe, is there a flaw in the law? Or is there a suggestion on the law? I mean,
I don't have a comment on the state of the law. My answer is that in order...
Somebody asked me to consult an attorney, and you are the Attorney General. And I think you're sending a terrible message to the world, to those people who are trying to make some simple decisions. The lack of clarity that you give to this body, the lack of clarity on this issue is pretty stunning.
Madam Attorney General, the central issue to me is this perception, frankly rooted in some realities of a dual-track or two-tiered justice system. And I know that you have dedicated your career to the pursuit of justice. I know you work for a blindfolded woman who's holding nothing but a set of scales. And I think it's important that she's blindfolded because she shouldn't see the race, the gender, the socioeconomic status, the fame or lack of fame of the person in front of her. And I'm sure you've experienced it like some of the rest of us. It's not just the suspect or the target or the defendant. The witnesses have to have confidence in the justice system. The jurors have to have confidence in the justice system. The public has to have confidence in the justice system. So this dual track, different set of rules for certain people than for others. It frankly should not matter whether you are running for president or running late to a kid's ball game. The same rules ought to apply to everyone. So let me ask you this. Why do you think it's important to use official email to conduct official business?
I believe it's important to do that. I think that certainly every department has chosen to craft the way in which they carry out their business, and it provides for a way of doing business in a secure system.
So you use official email to conduct official business?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And do you ever email, send or receive classified information on personal email?
I do not.
I doubt you even use your USDOJ.gov account to send classified information, do you?
We have separate systems.
Right.
So there would be a separate
classified system
for that.
Right. So not only do you not use personal email to do it, you don't even use your USDOJ.gov. You have a separate, dedicated system to handle classified information. Why?
We have a separate system to handle the security needs.
But my question is why? Why is it important enough to you to not use personal email to conduct public business and to use a separate, more safely guarded system when you do handle classified information?
That is the practice that I've certainly always followed. It
but
allows
it's not
for the
just
protection.
it's not just a personal preference, is it?
No, it allows for the protection of the information, both on a regular system, because again, that's still sensitive, law enforcement types of matters, and then a classified system for separately classified information.
What element do you think was lacking in the statutes that you evaluated as it relates to Secretary Clinton?
So let me, again, as I've indicated before, and I want to make it clear that As I indicated before, while the reason why I will not be going into the analysis that was provided and the discussion that we had between myself and the team is because we protect our teams and that they have to be free to provide information and analysis in a confidential way without the fear or impact of there being a political influence on that.
I understand
and that is why
that.
I have not gone into that type of discussion. What I can tell you is that the team did evaluate the relevant statutes that were considered in this investigation. They looked at all of the facts and evidence, and as in every case, they applied them to that statute to determine whether the elements had been met.
But my specific question to you, Madam Attorney General, is what element of which offense did you find lacking from an evidentiary standpoint?
Well, I would say that in order to answer that, I would have to go into the entire level of analysis.
Don't you think public perception in a single-track justice system is important enough that you could at least touch on what you thought was lacking?
Congressman, in this case, we have taken the unusual step of discussing it in ways that the Department typically does not, in order to provide more clarity into this situation. And while I understand that it is frustrating to a number of people, civilians as well as members of this body alike, we have taken extraordinary steps to discuss this matter in ways that typically we do not,
Let me ask you
particularly when
this.
charges are not brought. And as I indicated before, just so it's clear, my reasons for not going into the substance of the information that I receive and review before I made my decision to accept the recommendation are that the teams that I work with, whether it's this case or any other, be free to provide confidential analysis, discussion, without the input of any
With all due
kind of
respect,
political
Madam Attorney
influence.
General, you can do all of what you just described and still tell the people what element. I mean, the elements of a criminal offense are public, so there's no secret there. And for you to go through the elements and say, as Director Comey did, he said there was no specific intent. I'm out of time, but I suspect you have prosecuted reckless homicide cases, haven't you?
In the context of violent crime.
How about involuntary manslaughter?
For the department or personally?
No, just as a prosecutor. There's involuntary manslaughter. There's reckless homicide. There's felony DUI where you really didn't mean to hurt anybody. You really didn't, but you did. And this lack of specific intent is not a defense in any of those cases. So I think the public would like to know how you determined she did not have the intent to break the law and why you are applying a specific intent requirement here when you don't even do it in certain homicide cases.
Well, Congressman, as I've said, I think you've mentioned a number of state cases there. But as I've said, the reason why I am not going into the discussion I had and providing that particular level of information, although the FBI director did choose to do so, is that the information the team provides to me on this or any other case has to be given in a zone of confidentiality so that they can be clear and sure that there's never a political overtone to their decisions, nor will I apply one in accepting their decisions. That's why we have taken the unusual steps of providing greater information, as frustrating as that has been for a number of people to have additional information. That's why I took the unusual step of clarifying my role in this investigation.
Well, I'm out of time. The only thing I find frustrating is that even after this and Director Comey, people still believe that if you are famous, there's a different set of rules than if people don't know your name. And I think you're missing a wonderful opportunity to say with specificity which evidentiary element you found lacking. So Congress can go fix the statute if you think we need to, but right now, we have no idea whether or not a President Lynch could do exactly what Secretary Clinton did or whether President Clinton could do exactly what Secretary Clinton did. And I think that lack of clarity is bad for the Republic, quite frankly.
I happen to disagree with Director Comey's conclusion, but I have a great deal of respect for him. I have seen him to be nothing but an honorable man, and reasonable minds can disagree. So I just have some questions that are similar to what has been asked before, but a little bit different. Director Comey said repeatedly that Secretary Clinton and her colleagues were, quote, extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. Do you agree with this assessment?
I don't have a characterization of their actions. Typically, we do not characterize the actions of individuals. That was Director Comey's assessment of that, and my review
So
was
you don't
not of that.
accept his assessment but you only accept his recommendation to not charge.
As I said before, I did not come to a characterization or a description, as he did, of individual behavior. My discussion was focused on the investigation, what it revealed, and how it applied to the legal standards.
So Secretary Clinton had a security clearance while she was serving at the State Department, correct?
As far as I know, that is correct.
If any other federal employee with a security clearance is extremely careless with classified information, in your opinion, what would happen to that person's clearance?
I believe the matter would be reviewed and investigated, and the appropriate actions would be taken.
And in fact, Director Comey suggested if Secretary Clinton were anyone else, the facts uncovered in the FBI investigation could have cost her that security clearance. Is that correct?
I don't want to characterize the director's statements or testimony. I'd have to look
But
at those.
anybody else who would have been extremely careless with their security information, they would have lost their security clearance, correct?
I think the matter would have to be reviewed and handled according to the rules of the relevant agency.
In your experience as a federal prosecutor, if any other American with a security clearance had acted extremely carelessly with classified information, what would DOJ's position be on prosecuting that person?
Well, with respect to whether or not a prosecution would ensue, the issue would be the same as here, whether or not the evidence arose to the legal standard of all the statutes that were considered.
But you would seriously look at that, correct?
It would be the same consideration that was done here, but it would have to, again, reflect all of the relevant facts and not just a characterization of that. And again, I did not make a characterization or conclusion about that.
No, but if your characterization would have been that somebody acted extremely carelessly, what if that individual transacted business on Gmail?
As I said before, I don't have a characterization or description
I'm not asking for
of
your
anyone.
I'm not asking for that.
My only
I'm saying
point, sir,
if you would have found just a regular person working at DOJ extremely carelessly handling classified information on Gmail.
my only point, sir, is that the legal standard would have to be met.
Okay.
And you would have to look at the relevant statutes regarding that person's information and how it was transmitted.
So was Director Comey
and the
correct?
Characterization or description
You've said
does
that.
not go to that.
Was Director Comey correct in stating that the range of punishment is from reprimand to termination to a possible criminal prosecution when someone is found to have mishandled classified information?
Certainly, if he was speaking about the steps that the FBI would possibly take, I would certainly reflect. I believe he would be reflecting his agency's own understanding of that.
Has the department ever reprimanded, terminated, or prosecuted an employee for mishandling classified information?
I'm not at liberty to go into that. We don't discuss individual matters here.
So you haven't. This would be a public record if you have prosecuted somebody.
It would be a public record. I don't have that information now for you.
And you have not reprimanded or terminated anybody who has mishandled classified information?
I don't know the answer to that information. I'm happy to have our staff speak and provide you whatever information we can, consistent with DOJ policy and the law.
So if a low-level DOJ attorney or FBI agent was reprimanded for carelessness with classified information, would that person have any chance of being promoted or otherwise advancing in their career?
You know, Congressman, I can't speak to a hypothetical. I also, again, would urge caution with using a characterization or description instead of a legal analysis.
So you want us to respect Director Comey's conclusion but not his word?
You'd have to look at the facts in every situation.
I'm sorry. I'm actually confused by your statement. You want us to respect his conclusion, which I do, even though I disagree with it, but you don't want us to respect his words or to actually take any kind of statement that he made at face value. Is that what you're saying?
My answer is that, as I said before, a characterization or a description is not the issue. It was a relevant legal standard reached. In every case, you would look at the relevant legal statute and you would see if the determination had been made that, in fact, those elements had been met. You can't even tell us
if one of your employees carelessly used information, whether you would advance them in their career or not.
We look at every case and all the situations, all the facts and all the issues. We apply the rules and we come to a decision of determination there, consistent with the rules of our organization, as I believe any other organization would.
General Lynch, are federal employees generally prohibited from removing classified materials from secure area or network and placing it on open or unclassified networks?
Congressman, generally speaking,
it's a yes
the issue that you're talking about, it would be covered by statute and regulation.
So they're not allowed to do that?
And it would prohibit the behavior that you're talking about.
All right, and are people allowed to retain classified documents in an unclassified environment?
Generally, no.
All right. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to get back to Ms. Clinton for a second. How did this information wind up on her server? I doubt Mrs. Clinton was technically savvy enough to copy it to a thumb drive and move it from one to the other, didn't have the patience to retype it. So obviously some other people took it off classified network and sent it to her. Do you think those people should be prosecuted?
Well, Congressman, with respect to any of the individuals considered in the investigation, as I indicated, I won't be going into the discussions about them. And as I've indicated earlier, and I said I know that this is a frustrating exercise for you. It is because
it is, and it's pretty clear you're not going to answer
we
my
asked the
questions
team
on it. So
to provide information in a confidential manner so that it can be reviewed without their being influenced by any political overtones.
All right, well, it's pretty clear you're not going to answer any of my questions.
The former president then spoke at length about his grandchildren.
So y'all didn't speak at all about anything pending, any pending investigations or Mrs. Clinton's problems with the email or the Clinton Foundation or anything like that. None of that was discussed.
If I could continue with what was discussed.
No, I'm just asking if you to discuss something that might be relevant.
We did not discuss anything about a case or matter before the Department of Justice. We did not discuss Mrs. Clinton in any way. He spoke about his grandchildren at length.
Okay.
He spoke about his
apologize
travels.
for interrupting you. I've
spoke
only
about
got 5 minutes,
what he'd done
and
in
you've
Phoenix.
been very good at burning up the time and stonewalling. Should the president replace an attorney general if the attorney general does not enforce the law evenly, or should there be separate enforcement for different classes? And that's Stuart from Luling.
Congressman, there's no separate method of enforcement for anyone here. And as I said before, while I understand the frustration of people who disagree with the decision, I will say that it is similar to the frustration I have encountered when I, as a prosecutor, or others who are prosecutors, have to explain to someone why charges are not being brought, if their family member is involved, and the like. And so I understand the emotion that things generate. I understand the frustration that it generates. But it is something that we take very seriously. And as I said before, we follow the law, we follow the facts in every single case.
Director Comey said that the Department of Justice has grave concerns about whether it's appropriate to prosecute somebody under a gross negligence standard. Do you, as the Attorney General, have grave concerns about prosecuting, forget about this case, anybody under a gross negligence standard?
Our concerns are always whether or not we have the facts to support
I'm not
the charge.
asking about the facts.
That is a concern
Assume
in
you
every
have the
case.
facts. Forget about this case. Do you have grave concerns about bringing a prosecution under gross negligence?
I would have to have the factual record before me.
Did any of the people who were on the team that advised you, did they tell Director Comey that they had grave concerns about bringing a case under a gross negligence standard?
Congressman, I wasn't privy to those
you guys
conversations.
prosecute
so I'm not able
environmental
to
crimes under
say.
a negligence standard, correct?
We do prosecute a number of
Those are
crimes.
constitutional prosecutions, right?
We do prosecute a
States
number of
across
crimes
the
under
country
different
prosecute
standards.
under for homicide. You can have a negligent homicide. And so Director Comey said, well, look, people say you can do this, but how come there haven't been cases brought recently? How many cases has the Justice Department declined to bring under 18 U.S.C. Section 793F because they were concerned about the gross negligence standard?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that.
Do you know if there's been any that have been declined over the last 10, 20 years?
I don't have the answer to that.
I'd like to get that because I think that that's important, because you can say people haven't been prosecuted under it, but maybe people in the civilian sector have actually met their responsibilities by and large and not been extremely careless with it. I'm a little bit disappointed with how you've approached this. I think that given all the circumstances that are involved in this case, and again, I'm just talking about the appearance of what the average Joe sees. You yourself were appointed by President Clinton in the 90s to be U.S. Attorney. Your current boss has said on more than one occasion before Comey's recommendation that Hillary Clinton having top secret information on her email did not damage national security. You, of course, met with Bill Clinton privately just days before the decision was announced not to go ahead with this prosecution. Of course, your current boss has endorsed Secretary Clinton to be the next president of the United States. And in fact, they had a campaign trip scheduled, I believe, the afternoon that Director Comey announced his findings. And so with all of that surrounding, there's a lot of people that have concerns about whether this decision was made with proper integrity. And basically what you've told us today is, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to justify it, it is what it is. And that falls very short, I think, of what a lot of people want. And I've noticed that you have been willing to opine on other instances when it suits you. I mean, for example, in Orlando in June, you said the most effective response to terror is compassion, it's unity, and it's love. You were interjecting on that. You said after the San Bernardino attack that your greatest fear was the rise of anti-Muslim rhetoric. That was something that you volunteered. You discussed the possibility in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee in March of bringing civil actions against people who denied climate change. And of course, you also discussed taking potential criminal action against those engaged in anti-Muslim speech. And so I want to ask you whether your hear no evil, see no evil performance today, if somebody honestly just looks at what happened here and thinks that if they were a junior officer in the Navy or a mid-level official in the federal bureaucracy and they treated classified information like this, that they would have been held accountable, and they look to see all these circumstances, and then here you are to justify as the head of the department, and you're offering them nothing. Do you understand that there's going to be a lot of people that are not satisfied with that?
Well, Congressman, as I've indicated, I understand that people are often frustrated when they don't either understand or have clarity into the reasons behind a decision. In this matter, there have been a number of times when unprecedented clarity has been provided. In terms of the FBI director's statements, for example, that was unusual clarity into his thinking and what led up to his recommendation.
It's also unusual for the Justice Department to be investigating somebody who's endorsed by the sitting president, though. I believe that's completely unprecedented. So there's a lot of things. The unprecedented nature of this can cut both ways.
During last week's oversight hearing, Chairman Chaffetz and Director Comey asked Director Comey about Secretary Clinton's granting her attorneys access to emails for the purpose of document review. Specifically, he asked, did Hillary Clinton give non-cleared people access to classified information? Director Comey responded, yes. My question is this. Does the conscious decision on the part of Secretary Clinton to grant access to classified information to her attorneys who did not have security clearance constitute criminal intent under 18 U.S.C. Section 793D, which describes the intent element as the following: willfully communicates, delivers, transmits, or causes to be communicated, delivered, or transmitted, or attempts to communicate, deliver, transmit, or cause to be communicated, delivered, or transmitted to any person not entitled to receive it.
Congresswoman, I would need to have information about the recipients, what information or what background they had, what clearances they had or didn't have, and I simply am not able to provide you with that answer because I don't have that full information.
So you do not know if her attorneys had security clearance?
I do not have that information.
My understanding is they did not.
In 1965, a member of the Senate Labor Committee complained to the chairman of the committee that the new junior senator from New York was getting preferential treatment, and the chairman responded, I'm not treating Bobby Kennedy any different than I would any other future president of the United States. Did Hillary Clinton receive treatment that was different than others?
She received no treatment different from any other. The only difference in this case is that we have, again, as I've indicated before, provided more information about, at least from the FBI's point of view, the investigative team's thoughts on this.
So if a member of your staff took classified information home, put it on their server, their laptop, nothing would happen to that person?
We would review the matter and come to the appropriate decision. We would look to see at all of the relevant ramifications and see what fit.
So, you know, the meeting on the tarmac with former President Clinton, that was a pretty fortuitous meeting for you, wasn't it?
I would not say that.
Well, it gave you a perfect alibi, because if you had recused yourself, as some have suggested at the outset of this investigation, because you're friends with the Clintons and maybe hope to be Attorney General in her administration, then you wouldn't have, then you could stand here and say, I defer to the FBI director. But you didn't recuse yourself, but now you're using the meeting on the tarmac to basically say, to avoid the appearance of impropriety, I can't answer your question. Isn't that basically what's happened here today?
Congressman, I would not say it was fortuitous for me or for anyone. It led me to take, again, another unusual step in this case.
But that's what's happened today. In fact, I knew you weren't going to answer our questions today. And I apologize for wasting so much time here, because it's really not been very productive. And I asked my staff to count the number of times today you would say, I can't answer that question, or refuse to give an appropriate response. It's happened 74 times so far. So really, it's either one of two things. Either you're saying that because you want to avoid the appearance of impropriety, in which case you should have recused yourself, or you're trying to protect Hillary Clinton. So my colleague, Mr. Smith, asked earlier if you had talked with Bill or Hillary about serving as Attorney General in Hillary's administration. Have you talked to any of their staff?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to anyone on their transition team? I know they're talking to people.
I have not spoken to anyone on either the campaign or transition or any staff members affiliated with them.
Do you want to be Attorney General?
My focus is on being the Attorney General throughout the remainder of this administration and dealing with the issues that I've discussed here, particularly my focus on law enforcement and community relations and national security as represented by the Department's work in the most recent tragic actions facing this country. Also, my work involving vulnerable victims and human trafficking. My focus is on making sure that the resources and assets of the Department of Justice are dedicated towards those important goals, particularly when it comes to individuals who feel at odds or left out or somehow cut out of our society and therefore are in a situation where their relationship of trust with law enforcement and government.
Thank you, General. I'm going to reclaim my time. Why did you tell the FBI security detail not to have any cameras or phones when you met with President Clinton on the plane?
I didn't make any comments about cameras or phones or anything.
So no one directed the security detail not to take any pictures or anything like that? I
did not. I didn't make any comments about cameras or phones or anything.
So last week, Director Comey, I think when he was being questioned by Mr. Gowdy, said that Hillary Clinton didn't tell the truth when she said that she turned over all the emails, that all the emails had been reviewed by her lawyers, that nothing was classified, that she only had one device, and he was quite pointed in his comments that she wasn't telling the truth about all of those matters and other issues. Do you think she told the truth?
You know, I'm not privy to the reasoning on that. My understanding is that after that exchange, the committee was going to decide whether or not to make a referral. If that were the case, the matter would be reviewed and looked at, and it would be not appropriate to go into it until then.
But you didn't recuse yourself, so you're really using that meeting on the tarmac as a way to avoid answering your questions. Isn't that what's happening here? You're saying it to avoid the appearance of impropriety.
I have talked about my conversation with former President Clinton as a way to explain how it would have no impact on the case. And I felt it was important to explain that because I had earlier decided that I would be accepting the team's recommendation, but that also we didn't talk about anything involving cases or the investigation itself. The conversation was, as I've noted earlier, primarily personal and on his part. We've taken that unusual step so that there would not be a view that there would be any influence on that, on this matter at all.
And you've used that to not answer our questions today.
I've answered your questions. If you have more, I'm happy to hear them.
I know that the Attorney General's office is required to, the folks in your office are required to attend ethics training every year. Are you required to, as the Attorney General, to attend those as well? I do. And do they cover, I'm sure, the issue of conflict of interest and doing whatever is possible to avoid the appearance of impropriety?
Yes.
I say that in the context of the question that was just asked regarding the meeting on the tarmac, and I wondered if, and I know that you've indicated since then that you regret the unscheduled meeting, and that, moreover, the most important thing for you as Attorney General is the integrity of the Department of Justice, which I appreciate, and I think most Americans would agree with that statement. Do you recall when and whom told you that former President Clinton wanted to speak with you?
As I indicated, I was getting ready to leave the plane to disembark with my husband, and I don't recall who, but I was informed that former President Clinton wanted to say hello, so I agreed that he could say hello, and he did come on board and speak with my husband, myself,
I remember that
other
part.
people.
But full stop, right at that moment, at that very moment, I want you to think back. Did you think even for a split second that maybe perhaps that wasn't the right thing to do, that there might be a conflict of interest, or at the very, very least an appearance of impropriety to have that meeting with the spouse of a person under investigation, and in fact a key witness in another investigation, a former president of the United States, just for a second at that moment? Did you think about that?
I will tell you, Congressman, that at that moment my thought was, as it is in many instances, that I respond to courtesy with courtesy, and I viewed it as a brief social greeting, and it turned into a longer conversation certainly than I had anticipated,
But any time during that
felt
meeting,
that-
did you feel that, did it ever occur to you? I mean, you say in retrospect you regret it, but during that time frame, did you regret it at all?
Congressman, at the time that we had the conversation, as I indicated, I viewed it as a social conversation, similar to when other individuals have asked to say hello, and we speak and move on.
Fair enough. You've answered the question. Thank you very much for that answer. You've indicated that career prosecutors from your office assisted in the investigation, reviewed the evidence with the investigators with the FBI, correct?
They were the line team, as we call it.
Okay, so you had a team working. So did those career prosecutors have the opportunity to advise FBI investigators as to whether or not this was an actionable offense, whether probable cause existed?
Well, certainly they would have provided legal analysis. I'm not able to go into their specific discussions, obviously.
So I get that.
But they would have had discussions about the facts and about the legal analysis.
Your team did. Your team was part of the team at the Department of Justice, was part of this FBI investigation.
Well, the FBI is part of the Department of Justice also.
Okay.
When I apologize for the confusion. When I refer to the DOJ team, I actually mean the lawyers and the agents. So I apologize for that confusion.
So, but these were lawyers from your office, though, that were part of this team, is what I'm getting at. And they were were they part of also the recommendation that was provided by Director Comey? Do they help draft that recommendation?
My understanding is that Director Comey provided the information and recommendation that he provided. The information that I received was from the team. It included Director Comey.
Okay, so but what I'm saying is I don't want to mince words here, and I don't want to be elusive in my question. I want to be as direct as possible. Your team was part of this investigative process, so your team was also part of the recommendation that was put forward by Comey, Director Comey, excuse me.
Well, the recommendation that came to me included Director Comey's recommendation. It was a unanimous recommendation
by the
agents
team
and prosecutors.
Okay,
yes.
So, okay, I understand that. So this really was your recommendation that you accepted from your team.
It was a recommendation of the career agents and prosecutors who had done the work. They were, as I've indicated before, from within the National Security Division, affiliated with Maine Justice. And they are the ones who made the recommendation to me, and my decision was to accept their recommendation.
Okay, let me ask you one more thing. I know my time is fleeting here. Did Secretary Clinton have counsel present for the interview with the FBI?
I'm not privy to the details of her meeting.
So you don't know whether or not she was questioned under oath or whether recorded or any of those?
I'm not privy to the details of that.
Okay. You indicated earlier, my colleague made mention of the fact that there were relevant statutes in a certain case, an investigation that was going on. What are the relevant statutes involved in this Secretary Clinton case?
I believe that they have been discussed in terms of mishandling classified information. And
can you cite those chapter and verse so that I understand that you reviewed and understand the statutes that are being used?
The gentleman has expired, but the witness will be requested to answer the question.
Thank you. Let me get you the exact citations of statutes that would have been under consideration, because I don't want to misstate here, but we've discussed them here generally, and the discussions have been of the relevant statutes, so they have been discussed here, but let me get you the exact citations.
I never thought I'd say this. I actually, and I say this with due respect, Attorney General, I miss Eric Holder. Because at least when he came here, he gave us answers. We didn't like it, but I've spent the last 4 hours listening to basically the Attorney General of the United States not willing to make a concrete statement of law, to not be willing to say that when given the opportunity by a colleague of mine, who made the decision in this case. I understand Director Comey stepped up and said, here's the decision we recommend. And you have been willing to say as well, we just accepted the team recommendation. When given the opportunity to say, do you accept this decision, you've never answered directly that you own this decision. Do you own this decision?
Congressman, as I've stated, I made the decision, and I do accept. I did accept it, and therefore I made the decision to accept that recommendation. That was the action that I took.
The problem that we're having here, though, is you took a decision because you had to. Your own words just a few moments ago, that the meeting on the tarmac led you to do something. That was your exact words. It led me to do something, and that was basically recuse yourself, but didn't recuse yourself. You just said, I'm going to accept what they tell me.
It led me to discuss the decision I'd already made about how the matter would be.
Had you already had conversations with the team before you made this statement and before the meeting on the tarmac?
No, before I had a conversation with former President Clinton, I had not spoken with the team. I had concluded in my mind how it should best be resolved because I had tremendous faith in their work and their integrity.
Did you have it as best be resolved as far as what they're doing and the way it was going about, or the end outcome?
I had no conversations about the end outcome of the investigation.
Do you believe that there is such a thing as a strict liability offense?
Depending upon the statute, environmental matters,
No,
for example,
we went to law school. Is there
OSHA,
strict liability offenses or not?
In OSHA, for example, there are.
That
In
a
some
yes or no?
environmental cases, there are.
Simply yes or no.
I've given you two examples.
No, I want a yes or a no. Is there strict
I've
liability
given you
offenses?
2 examples.
I'm not. This is, again, the issue that we have here is there's no ownership at DOJ. It's no wonder the optics of this so bad. I've never agreed probably with David Axelrod in my life, but the optics of this are terrible, and you today have made it worse. And as also a member of the military who just got through with my drill duty this weekend, you have basically, to me, offended every military member here who handles classified information, who does so with their training, and you've basically said, well, it depends on this. I got a question for you. Riding down the road, the speed limit says 55. I'm doing 65. Have I broke the law?
You'd have to ask the Highway Patrol.
Oh,
They
my
would
God.
likely write you a ticket. They would likely write you a ticket for that.
I'm not sure. I went to a small little small law school. We taught the law. Harvard, I'm not sure anymore. Did you break the law or not? 65 and a 55. My dad was a state trooper. Be careful with your answer. You're under oath.
As I said before, you would get a ticket for that.
Okay, so you broke the law.
You would be cited for that. That would be considered an offense.
In this, just the amazingness of this, when you've been asked many times, you said, I'm not going to talk about this. The day after, you said, well, I'm just going to have to accept whatever they tell me because you're not going to do any investigation. You're not going to put the Attorney General, the top law enforcement officer's stamp of approval on it. You said, I'm just going to accept whatever they give me. Did you at least read anything before you had a press conference the next day? Did you at least look at the testimony from Hillary Clinton?
Well,
Did you at
Congressman,
least look at anything?
Time of the gentleman.
I did not hold a press
Time of the gentleman has
conference. I issued a
expired. The witness
statement.
can answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did not issue a press conference. I issued a statement. I did receive a briefing from the team. It was thorough. It discussed the findings that they had come to. It discussed the legal analysis that they had made. My decision was to accept those findings. And as I've said before, that was my decision.
As a famous leader once said, the buck stops with me. Please go read that. This has been depressing.
General Lynch, after your meeting with Bill Clinton, you were asked in an interview about the appearance of impropriety and said, no matter how I view it, I understand how people view it. It has now cast a shadow over how this case may be received. Do you remember saying that?
That was a few days afterwards in an interview. Yes, sir.
And we know that you made the decision at that point not to recuse yourself from this investigation. 2 days after you made that statement about casting a shadow on the integrity of the Department of Justice, the New York Times reported that, quote, Democrats close to Mrs. Clinton say that she may decide to retain Ms. Lynch, the nation's first black woman, to be Attorney General, end quote. Did the timing of that, right after the Bill Clinton meeting, give rise to any thought in your mind of reconsidering whether or not recusal in the light of appearance of impropriety might be appropriate?
Congressman, I have no knowledge of the source of that statement, nor have I had any
So you didn't
conversations
reconsider?
about that.
Didn't give it any thought?
My view was that I needed to discuss the conversations I had with the former president
Let me
to
move on.
clarify my role in the investigation.
So I don't want to impugn your integrity by asking you whether the prospect of future employment as Attorney General in a Hillary Clinton administration influenced your decision whether or not to recuse yourself or influenced your final decision regarding prosecution. But now that you've already made that decision and closed the matter, will you consider serving as an Attorney General in the Hillary Clinton administration?
Congressman, my focus is on serving as Attorney General in
No,
this
I don't care about your focus. What I want to know is, will you rule it out?
That is my focus now.
You won't rule it out.
It is working on the issues
Will you
before the
rule it
Department
out?
of Justice. That
Okay,
matter is
so-
not before me.
Well, I got to tell you, that shadow that you cast on the Department of Justice just got a whole lot bigger. Because if you're not willing to rule out future employment in the Hillary Clinton administration, what that means is the American people have every right to wonder whether or not you looked at this through a fair and impartial lens, because your answer tells the American people that after the FBI director told you that Ms. Clinton had been extremely careless with at least 110 emails marked as top secret, secret, or classified and may have jeopardized the lives of actual Americans, and told you that she made numerous false public statements about sending, receiving, or turning over classified materials, you might want to apply for a job with her? Your answer, not ruling out employment with her, means that as much of the free world is wondering whether or not Hillary Clinton should have been prosecuted and possibly sent to prison for being extremely careless, as the FBI director said, with hundreds of top secret, secret, and classified emails, you're telling the American people watching today that instead of going to jail, faced with the prospect of possible future employment, you think she should go to the other end of the spectrum and be eligible to be the person with greater access and greater control over America's most sensitive and trusted national security information than anyone else on the planet? I got to tell you, utter shock is an understatement with respect to what I just heard you say. So let me ask you this question.
Well, Congressman,
I want to ask you this way. My time is limited and the clock is moving. Based upon your unwillingness to rule out future employment, in light of the fact that you and your husband had a 30-minute conversation with the spouse of a pending federal investigation, of the subject or target of a pending federal investigation, and with a person who would be the subject or target of the federal investigation, if there is one into the Clinton Foundation, would you at least agree with me that if there is such an investigation, you'll have to recuse yourself from that one?
Congressman, with respect to other matters before this committee or any other, or before the Department of Justice, they'll be reviewed like any other. I will take all the appropriate action that I would need to take
that as a no
in that instance.
And let me move on.
And Congressman,
then,
as I've indicated to your colleague, just as I will not comment on the statements of candidates or candidacy of anyone,
I'm not going to let you run out the clock on
either
the American
side,
people that
I
have
would not
questions that
comment
need to be
on the
answered.
candidacy.
So let me move on.
The other one.
On July 5th, 1 week after your meeting with Bill Clinton, FBI director made an unprecedented, extraordinary public recommendation not to indict. But his statement was just a recommendation. You've said, I made the decision. And in his statement to the press, he said that what that decision would include would be, quote, considerations like the strength of evidence, especially regarding intent. He said also that a responsible decision would consider the context of a person's action. So my question to you is, as you made the decision, did your final decision weigh the strength of the evidence and the context of Hillary Clinton's actions?
I will tell you, Congressman, that that was part of what the team that was presenting to me was focused on, and it was certainly encompassed those issues as well as all of the other issues that I've indicated before that would be in that. It would be contained within their entire recommendation to me.
And that was reflected in your two-sentence statement about that starts out late this afternoon. I met with FBI Director Jim Comey and career prosecutors. By the way, how long did that meeting last?
You know, I don't recall.
Hours?
I don't recall, and I wouldn't be providing that information.
More than hours?
I don't recall and would not be providing that information.
It says late in the afternoon. I assume it was in one day?
It's clear from the statement when the meeting occurred.
Okay, so it happened the day after, and apparently within a matter of hours, if it happened in one day. So you just told us that after a year-long investigation involving 150 FBI agents working around the clock, involving more than 30,000 emails, tens of thousands of man-hours, that your thoughtful, careful weighing and strength of the evidence took you an afternoon, a cup of coffee with the FBI director, that your decision in this case for charges relating to a person who, according to the FBI director, said was extremely careless handling America's most sensitive national security matters and is seeking to be a candidate in charge of America's most sensitive national security matters, took the better part of an afternoon. It didn't last weeks, didn't last months, didn't take days. You weighed that evidence, determined her intent and gross negligence in a matter of hours. Will you at least tell the American people whether or not you at least reviewed the 110 top secret, secret, and classified emails that we know that she sent and received on an unsecure, unauthorized server? Will you at least answer that?
As I have indicated.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The witness is permitted to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've indicated, I received a recommendation after a briefing from the team, which included the career lawyers as well as the FBI director. I received a full and thorough briefing. We reviewed and discussed the matter, and I accepted their recommendation.
Well,
and as I've indicated earlier, again, just to be clear, the reason I do not go into these internal meetings is because the teams of prosecutors and agents who work on every matter need to be able to provide their full and unfettered advice, counsel, discussion, without the fear of political overtones, without the fear of that kind of
Since you didn't
influence.
answer that question, I'll give you a preview that I'll ask Director Comey that when he's in front of Homeland next week. And let me just close then, summarize by saying, so less than after a week after you met privately with the spouse of a target of a federal investigation, a target with whom you haven't ruled out applying for a job, you didn't recuse yourself and instead spent a grand total of a few hours reaching a decision regarding tens of thousands of documents involving our national security, and you can't seem to understand why the American people, Republicans, Democrats, and independents are outraged at your actions. If you thought the meeting that you had on the tarmac with Bill Clinton cast a shadow over the integrity of the Department of Justice, what I've heard today from you made the size of that shadow something that I will tell you that as far as casting shadows that the American people pay attention to, Punxsutawney Phil's got nothing on you.
Well, General Lynch, this concludes our hearing. I thank you for providing us with more than 4.5 hours of your time. However, scores of questions were posed to you that were not answered by you. Some you've offered to get back to us about in writing afterwards. We will be forwarding to you additional questions related to other matters raised, as well as the investigation and non-decision to prosecute former Secretary of State Clinton, and we would expect that you would answer those questions. You are the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, and you are the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, and the final decision regarding the prosecution is yours. And the fact that you were not able to provide us with answers regarding how that decision was reached is very concerning to members of this committee and to the American public.